What's the weirdest and most unusual experience you've had in the Appalachian Mountains? Buckle up, story time. Let me first shed some context on this area. You know how almost every region has a haunted location, like a haunted house? Everyone knows the history there, and everyone also knows that that history is a little dark. People funnel all sorts of energy into that location. The human brain is a very powerful thing, and when enough human brains come together in one idea and focalize in to a certain location, like a haunted house, for example, it can bring forth some things, manifesting entities with energies. Now, I live in the Appalachian foothills, the gateway to the Appalachian Mountains. I live smack dab in the middle of Wayne National Forest. A lot of native people used to live here, and they were relocated, offsetting an entire way of life, removing native people from their holy lands, native people dying in droves. Well, a lot of them focalized a lot of that energy to bring forth a certain entity that I don't even like saying out loud, but I've seen it, and it was fucking terrifying. All of our roads around here just go through endless forest. It can kind of get to your head when you're driving at night. Hardly any cell phone service in a very remote and sparsely populated area. One night I was heading home from fishing, just listening to the radio and carrying on, when a coyote stepped into the middle of the road. This thing ain't moving out of the road, so I just hit my brakes and I sit there with it in my headlights. When I first saw it, it'd be about as far as where that barn is, but it got about as close to where that fence is right there. It was acting real strange, real confident, nonchalant, like I didn't matter, like that big hunk of steel that I was driving, it didn't care about. It was walking right down the center of that lane. When it gets from about me to that fence, it just stops. I've never seen an animal be so still in my life. So I'm honking my horn at it. I'm making all sorts of noise and hooting. I don't want to hit this thing. I want to just get around it. But something's really striking me off with it. I honk at it several more times till finally I take my car out of park, and the moment I took my car out of park, I saw it stand up. Just like the freaking hair on my arm right now, I saw it stand up on its back legs, man, and it rattled me to my core. We don't even say the name of this thing out loud here. You'll just invoke it. The only thing I thought to do was just accelerate hard and get past it and try not to look at it as I got by. But I could not help but notice it remained perfectly still, except for its head twisting, looking at me as I went by it. I was terrified to look in my rear view. Terrified. I flew down them old coal mining roads and those old wagon trails, man. I was hauling ass to get home. It never once felt like it wanted to hurt me. Just wanted to make sure that I knew that it was real. As big and as brawny and as strong as I am, there wasn't a single part of my head that thought that I could win whatever that was. It psychologically dominated me without barely moving. When it stood up, it looked like it had gained like an extra 2 feet, just perfectly still. I got more of them. Me and Cody had a few run-ins with the big guy too. Me and Cody even got impressions of his feet, but that's a story for another time. Welcome to Appalachia. Stay safe, stay wild.
This group of friends faced a whistling, screaming demon in Appalachia territory, and it genuinely spooked me. I got this story from a first-person retelling of an eyewitness account that they had. We don't know the name of this person, so I'm just going to call him Mark. Mark tells a story about the encounter his group had with this unknown humanoid figure that stood about 8 to 9 feet tall while camping on the Montour Trail in western Pennsylvania. Mark and his friends go to set up camp at the Boggs campsite. Most of the group members were ill-prepared. They mostly just brought recreational supplies. Other than Mark, he brought like a couple blankets and was actually dressed warm. Because of this, Mark assumes that they're going to be standing by the fire all night, and he soon realizes that it will become his responsibility to go get the firewood most of the time. When they got there around 3 p.m., it wasn't too cold, but it was expected to get into the 40s that night. They spent several hours just eating, drinking, and enjoying some music, hanging out with each other. They were quickly burning through all the nearby wood, so Mark was having to go further and further out each time. At 12:30 a.m., Mark had to go so far that he was losing sight of camp, but being 6'5", he wasn't too worried about being alone in the woods. That's when he heard the first whistle. He said it sounded like someone breathing through a snorkel. At this point, he's just like,
Has to bend the wind.
Between 1 and 2 a.m., the rain is replaced with snow, and so Mark is yet again out getting firewood. On his way back this time, the whistling is heard again, and it's even louder this time, and he's starting to really notice how weird it is. The wind hasn't picked up despite the whistling being louder, and he thinks that maybe it's just changed direction or something. He keeps walking until he's able to start hearing faint music coming from his camp. As Mark reaches the top of the hill, right before he goes down to the campsite, he hears loud noises echoing behind him. He assumes a tree fell or maybe a deer knocked something over, so he turns around, shines his flashlight everywhere, but he can't see anything that's happened, and nothing's fell, and he just doesn't know where it came from. He's back at camp now, so it doesn't really matter to him. He just forgets all about it. By 4:30 a.m., everyone's so cold that they all decide to go with him to gather some wood. They split up. naturally. Mark ended up further away from the camp than he originally intended to, looking for some wood that was not fast-burning pine. And the whistling starts again. This time he could tell it was coming from his left, so he turned his flashlight in that direction just to see what was there. Nothing was there. It stopped briefly, then picked up again, seeming like it was coming from a different direction this time. This time in front of him, a little bit to his right. He's thinking maybe the wind is just catching in the branches just right to make this odd specific sound, so he tries to ignore it and goes back to doing what he's doing. As he's returning, the noises seem to follow him. They're coming from his left, his right, and seem to always be just behind him. He keeps turning his flashlight in all directions. He's still not seeing anything. He's thinking like, whatever. Then there was just one sharp whistle and it paused. That's when he heard it, a voice saying, "Damn, it's cold out here." Ugh. At this point, Mark is assuming it's his friend, specifically one that he calls R. Couldn't locate R with his flashlight, and he starts yelling out, like, "Where you at?" Mark then hears a branch snap and notices a movement and thinks that R is now in a different location. Aims his flashlight, no sign of him. He thinks maybe he's hiding behind a bush or a tree. Mark calls out to him, "R," no response. He's thinking that maybe he's trying to scare him, but he's still worried that he might get lost on his way back to camp, so he goes, "I'm going back to camp." He shines his flashlight around one last time, and Mark sees something dart into the bushes about 40 feet from where he had heard what he thought was R. He yells, "I see you, big man, grab some wood and come back." He waits a few more seconds before he turns around and starts walking back. Suddenly, he's hearing whistling again. No matter how fast he moved, it seemed to always be right behind him. So he decides to sit under a tree and wait for R to return, thinking eventually he's gonna have to walk back past him. I'm guessing he's still assuming that the whistling is R. The whistling remained consistent, and it started to move in like an odd circular pattern around him, appearing in one spot, then shifting to another. Mark is still thinking it's the wind because of the way it's moving around oddly. He's like, that's the only logical explanation. I'd be trying to tell myself that too, to be honest. He's still looking around for R, periodically turning on his flashlight, looking around, and he noticed that weirdly the whistling stops whenever he's looking around for like a second or two, and it'd be eerily quiet. Gets up, brushes the dirt off, thinks, surely he's gonna be coming soon. He starts walking back towards the camp again, and that's when he notices something move out of the corner of his eye. Scanned the area, saw nothing. Took a few more steps, saw another flicker of movement. The whistling starts again. As the whistling keeps being accompanied with like brief movements in the bushes, like he starts to pick up his pace. First a speed walk, then a jog. He's thinking R is usually pretty sluggish, and he doesn't think that he'd be able to move that fast, so he gets pretty freaked and this time dives under a bush. Silence again. He's thinking, is there a coyote stalking me, maybe? His flashlight's off, so he's letting his eyes adjust. He tries to peek out from the bushes, and he hears persistent whistling again. He waited for a little while, and that's when he heard it speak, this time in a distorted imitation of his own voice, saying, "Big man." And that's when he decides that this is not human, this is not R, it's not good. Spoke again, mimicking when he was saying R, then it was abruptly cut off and went back to camp. It then repeats several phrases in different voices, discussing how cold it is, asking questions like, "What was that?" and "Stop fucking with me." And each voice that spoke sounded like it had something lodged in his throat. Mark slowly pokes his head out from underneath the bush, and that's when he sees something sitting against a tree, in the same position that he had been earlier. Its left leg was straight out, while its right leg is at an angle, and its hands are resting behind its head. And for a moment, it could have fooled him into thinking that it was actually R. That's when the figure began to whistle. The creature moves its hands in front of it, almost like Mark was doing with the flashlight, and then it starts to stand up. Mark describes, "Oh, it was tall. I only weighed 166 pounds and was mostly skin and bone, so when I noted that the thing was skinny, it was an exaggeration. I could see the thin, long, spindly arms were silhouetted against the snow, covering a nearby bush. When it stood, it hunched over. I wasn't sure if it had been slouching, but he certainly did slouch." The being walked a few paces away, and it stood completely up, and it was massive. Mark used to work with stage directions and stage walls that were like 8 feet tall, and he said it could clearly see over that, at least by a foot, so it's about 9 feet tall. It slowly peered around, and he could see that it had no hair and had a really disfigured skull. Its jaw hung down unnaturally and had very unpronounced lips, but it was still kind of hard to see it in the dark. Then it called out with a final garble, "R, big man." A sound that Mark says resembled someone in distress. Then it just starts screaming. Mark says that his dad used to take him to air shows a lot as a kid, and this scream reached a pitch and volume that was similar to an F-16 fighter jet. He's frozen in place while the figure continues just peering around, scanning the area. Then it crouches down and leaps onto a branch that's about 15 feet in the air. It just sits there squatting, whistling, and staring off into the distance. Suddenly, it took off, faster than anything ever could in nature. Mark counts to 10 in his head, the forest goes completely silent, and he finally makes a run for it, avoiding using his flashlight, and he's trying really hard not to make a sound. Before climbing down that hill back to camp, he takes one last look at the woods, and he's just not sure whether what he saw was real or just a figment of his imagination. He's finally back to the relative safety of the fire, where the other members of the group, Y and J, are just waiting for him. They ask him where his wood is, and he just kind of makes up some excuse about it having bugs in it. They're like, okay, whatever, and Mark asks, where's R? They go, check the tent, and he's in there, passed out, asleep, just dead asleep. Mark crawls into his sleeping bag to try and just forget everything and warm back up. And then he hears the scream again. He's thinking, please don't let it come here. And normally when this group would go out camping, Mark would tell them when they heard a noise, like what it was. And he's just silent. He asks if they heard the first scream, and they're like, yeah. They're like, did you see it? And he's like, yep. They're asking what it was. He has no clue. And then he quickly describes it to them so they could listen for any more noises. He's telling them about how it imitated his own voice. They're thinking maybe it's a truck on the highway or an owl, making up pretty much any excuse. Next morning, they went to a walk where Mark had saw the creature, and it hadn't snowed much the night before. The tree he had sat under had scratch marks all over it. The area where it was standing before it jumped on the branch had a ton of footprints on it that seemed to have no apparent, order to them. It looked like it had run over every square inch of that area, coming very, very close to where Mark had been hiding in that bush. Mark didn't really know anything about cryptids, so when he got home, he tried to research it. The closest he could come up to was a wendigo, but it didn't really have antlers, and it just looked very odd shaped in the skull. But that's pretty much the closest we can come to. So yeah, if you hear whistling while in the Appalachian woods, just leave. If you like this kind of stuff, follow for more. If you watched the entire thing, thank you so much for watching. I don't really understand where all this is coming from on TikTok, where they're saying don't whistle yourself in the Appalachian woods. I've grown up here my whole life. I haven't really ever heard that, but I was always told that if I heard whistling or any other kind of weird noises like that, to just kind of leave the area. I know in my last video I said I wanted to try and make one every day, and that was a week ago. I'm still learning on how to find these stories and do research on them in bulk, and it's really hard to find ones that you haven't already heard a million times, especially if you've been into these types of scary, spooky, urban legend types encounter stories from firsthand accounts. You've heard all the usual ones over and over again. So but I really like sharing these that I find that really just freak me out. I'm really desensitized to horror stuff, so if it freaks me out, I'm gonna share it. I want to know what you guys think it was. Let me know down in the comment what your theories are, and don't just say wendigo, because that's basic. I want to know what other theories there are, or if you've heard any other scary stories like this, or have your own you want to share. Just DM me. I would love to make a video about it.
Something was pretending to be my mom. So this is a story submitted by one of my followers. She wants to remain anonymous, but she said we can call her Julie. So Julie and her mom have been cleaning all day long, and she said by the time they got finished, it was midnight. So her mom was ready to go take a shower. She went and got in the shower, and then Julie hears her mom call her name, but she's like, no, she's in the shower, so she can't be calling my name. So she just ignored it, kind of brushed it off. And then she hears it again, but louder. So this time she goes to the bathroom and she asks her mom, she's like, are you calling me? And her mom's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So this really freaked her out because she heard it twice now. So she goes to her room and she starts Googling, what could be calling my name and mimicking someone's voice in my home. So Google tells her that this could be an SW, or what I like to call a flesh pedestrian. Well, it could be that, or it could just be a mimic. Either way, it was freaking her out, and it starts saying her name louder than before, right outside of her door, and then starts knocking on her door. So she kind of gets under her covers, and then it knocks again. So she gets up to open it, probably thinking maybe it is her mom. But when she opens the door, there's no one there. So she shuts the door, goes back and gets back in her bed under her covers, and then things start saying her name over and over and over again. Julie, 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 Julie. Now, mind you, in her mom's voice. So she texts her mom, and her mom didn't text her back because her mom was already in bed asleep. So then she decides, okay, I'm just terrified. I'm just going to try to go to sleep. And she hears it say, don't sleep. So now she gets up and locks her door and goes to get back in her bed, and she starts hearing scratching. So now she's like, okay, I'm ignoring this. I'm going to sleep. She finally fell asleep. She said she woke up about 20 minutes later, and I guess she checked her door because she said she saw scratches on the door. So she ends up later asking her mom about the scratches, and obviously her mom has no freaking clue about any of this, and especially not scratches on her door. And she said still when she's in her room, she can feel the energy of this thing, and she said she feels like it's a super angry entity, whatever it is. What do you think it is?
My family lives near the Appalachian Trail, and I've lived near the Appalachian Trail for nearly my entire life in 2 different states, actually 3 different states, sorry. 3 different states I've lived almost really close to the Appalachian Trail. And people are always talking about how beautiful the trail is itself, like how tranquil it is and whatever. And my husband, who moved from Brazil, had never been there before. So we naturally decided to go camping there one time. I don't know if you're like familiar with Appalachia or anything, but once you step into those woods, like you can feel a significant change in the atmosphere. Like the energy just gets way more heavy and it's just weird. It feels off. You know that feeling in your gut when you just like know something's off? That's kind of how I was feeling the entire time that we were on the trail, but my husband was having a grand old time, and so I just pushed on. I was like, you know, he's having a great time. He's never been out in these types of woods before. We're just gonna keep going. Whatever, we hiked on, and then we finally found our little camping spot, and when we did set up our camping spot, that's when I noticed that the sounds in the forest had stopped. And if you know anything about the woods, that is not a good sign. We set up our camping spot anyways. I kind of glanced over at my husband to see if he was picking up on what the energy was around the woods, and he totally was too, but he didn't say anything about it, and we just kind of pressed on. Surprisingly though, we were able to fall asleep in our tent. Like the beginning of the night was fine, other than the uneasy feeling that we both kind of had. But I want to say it was around midnight when we started to hear the sounds of footsteps outside of our tent. And if you are like an avid camper, you know that like footsteps outside of your tent is like usually just an animal. However, you can always tell when it's an animal walking on 4 legs versus 2. You know what I mean? So when we heard the footsteps, we froze and we listened and we were like, yo, this is not the sound of an animal. Like we could hear like kind of this low guttural growling that didn't sound like a bear. It didn't sound like any kind of animal that we've ever heard of before. Kind of like it wasn't a human, but it also wasn't quite animal, if that makes any sense. Does that make sense? I don't know what to tell you. It just sounded wrong. So my husband, being the big bad Brazilian that he is, he unzipped the tent and stuck his head out. Whatever he saw had him so damn shook that he muckled onto my arm so hard and he said, "Don't move. Don't move." He was like, "Don't look, don't look, don't look, don't move, don't look." And of course I looked. And what I saw has absolutely deterred me from going camping on the Appalachian Trail since. It was like this tall, pale, kind of like too thin to be a man type figure. Its arms were really gangly, like they were too long for its body. Mind you, I couldn't see it very clearly, okay, so I'm just like kind of telling you what the outline of what I saw looked like. I could tell that its head was kind of cocked to the side, like something does when it's kind of studying you, you know, like an animal or like something curious. It's like, and although I couldn't see its figure completely, I did see its glowing, creepy looking eyes. They looked like the glowing eyes of an animal off in the woods, but you know, they were like up too high to be an animal. It looked like a person, but somebody who's too tall to be a person, but they were standing like a man. Does that make sense to you? I don't really know how to explain it, but my mind knows what it looks like. We stayed locked in place, barely breathing, clutching on to each other, shaking. My chest felt like it was going to explode from holding everything in. Like the anticipation was absolutely crazy. Was this thing going to run at our tent? What was this thing going to do? Every instinct in my body told me to scream and run away, but both of those things in Appalachia are an absolute no-no. Those types of creatures love a good chase. Number 1 rule in Appalachia is if you've seen something, no you didn't. If you've heard something, no the fuck you didn't. And if you ever see something, you're supposed to just back away slowly. Not pay attention. I didn't see anything. I'm just gonna go back to my car. But anyway, after what seemed like forever, this thing finally stopped staring into our souls, dropped on all 4s, and then skittered into the woods as fast as it could. When I say fast, like it was like there and then it wasn't. Like, yeah, we didn't go investigate, obviously. We hunkered down in our tent and we didn't move or sleep for the rest of the night. And as soon as the sky turned even the lightest bit of gray, we sprung into action and tore up our whole entire campsite and left as soon as we could. I've heard so many other stories of creepy things happening to people on the Appalachian Trail. So honestly, it just kind of seems like a thing that happens when you go there, which makes sense. I mean, those are the oldest mountains in America. They have a lot of history, a lot of creatures that we refuse to acknowledge. So if you ever decide to go to Appalachia, do not forget the rules of the woods.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? You want to hear the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me? Well, one of. So when I was a little kid, I would go to graveyards sometimes. My mom would like kick me out of the house because she wanted to clean. She would not open that door for nothing. So I was like, I'm gonna go on an adventure. So I went up this freaking mountain. We lived on a mountain in the middle of BFE, West Virginia, by the way. So I went up on this mountain and I found this really old graveyard. It's this like World War II cemetery memorial place. And I would just like mosey around, just like, I don't know what I was doing when I was a kid. I just like graveyards. I would like pick up flowers if they had like knocked over, and I just like hang out with them because, you know, they probably needed some company. And there was this little yellow house across from the cemetery. It was this beautiful, like, bright yellow house with, like, rocking chairs out front. And there was an old man who had been sitting there watching me. I don't know at what point, but I just knew that he, like, had been sitting there watching me, and he was rocking in his rocking chair. And I don't know if he called me over or not, but I eventually just kind of, like, wandered over to his house. Stranger danger, I know, but I had no stranger danger in me. So I sat down on the other rocking chair. And we just like kind of rocked together, and he was like, "What's your name?" And I told him my name, and he didn't really, it was just like a little conversation. There wasn't much, but I remember him being like, "Do you want some lemonade?" And he went inside and he got lemonade, and brought it out, and we just sat there rocking and drinking the lemonade. And eventually I got up and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go now." He was just like, "Okay, goodbye." And I walked down the road, like, I don't know, I kept walking down this road just seeing if I could find something else to do. I never found anything. I ended up walking back, and when I passed back by, the yellow house was like, it was like decrepit. Like the rocking chairs were like broken, and the house was not bright yellow. There was no old man. I don't know. I was very confused, and I went home. But there were many other times I walked up there to that cemetery, and the house never looked like bright yellow. It was always like decrepit, and I was just very confused, like, what happened? Never saw the old man again. But as an adult now, I'm like, was that old man real? Like, did that actually happen? Did I make it up? Like I know that I drank lemonade with him. I have like vivid memories of the outside of this house and that old man and drinking the lemonade and talking to him and him talking to me. But I could never make sense of like why, and just me walking like somewhere else for like 30 minutes and coming back, did the house look different, and why did it always look different after that? It was just, I don't know. It's something in my brain that I've always wondered about. I'm just like, the fuck? Alright, there you go. Have a good day.
And just getting some fresh air. And I wanted to thank everybody for getting that video to 1 million views. That was pretty crazy. I didn't expect that at all. Usually I'm stuck in like the 200-300 range, but out here in Appalachia, you kind of experience some really weird stuff, and it's hard to explain, but I like hanging back in the woods. It's just really creepy sometimes. You know, do you guys... All the noise just disappeared. Time to go.
Well, Davister, you heard correct. I grew up in the Appalachia for the first 21 years of my life, and it's Appalachia Mountains, not Appalachia. If you're from there, you know, don't fight me on this. And also, if you're from Appalachia, you know the rules. You shut your curtains at night, you lock your doors, you lock your windows, you never go out in the woods alone. You use a buddy system, and if you think you heard something, no you didn't. There's one particular time growing up, I did not follow these rules, and what happened to me still bothers me to this day. I used to ride horses, and me and my friends would go trail riding a lot. This particular day, it was just me and one other friend. We went out into the woods around sunset, and this was a pretty big property with lots of like trees. There were some open field streams, things like that. And we knew the trail pretty well. So this particular day, I don't know what got into us, but we decided we were going to play a game of hide and seek on horseback. I told her that I would hide first, so I went up the trail a little ways and then cut off over this like stream back into this more remote area of the woods. There was this old rundown cabin that I decided to hide behind,
And my horse was very docile, like very gentle. Nothing ever spooked him. But as I was hiding there, he became extremely restless. This again was not at all in my horse's nature, so I started to feel like really uneasy, like what is going on. I decided I was just going to take him back down to the trail and just go try to find my friend so that we could get back to the barn. My horse would not budge, refused to go back down that trail. I finally got off my horse because I was like, well, maybe if I just lead him, he'll follow me back down. And this is the part that still terrifies me, but at that moment, everything got really, really quiet, including my horse. And I heard my friend say, "Hey, Sydney." I was like, oh my God, thank God she's found me. I'm like, "Hey girl, I'm over here." But I couldn't see her. Like, I was like, "Where are you? Hello?" And then I started to hear, psst, psst. And then again, "Sydney, this way." At this point, y'all, I am in tears. I get back on my horse and sprint back to the barn. By the time I get back to the barn, it's almost dark out, and I see that my friend's horse is in the stall. I'm like, what the heck? Why did she come back and just leave me out there in the woods? I mean, this whole incident was maybe about 30 minutes, so I don't know why she would have just left. I find her in the tack room, and she was like, "You were out there for like an hour and a half." It was like, "I couldn't find you. I didn't know where you were, so I just came back." I look at the clock and she was absolutely right. It had been almost 2 hours that I was out there, and it felt like it was only like 20 minutes. I told her what happened to me. We were both just so terrified, like trying in our brains to figure out what that could have been. And to this day, I still have no idea. So yes, the stories you hear of the Appalachian Mountains are so true. If you have any encounters with this or any experience, or you have any stories to share about the Appalachian Mountains, leave it in the comments because I would love to know your experience.
As many of you know, I grew up in deep Appalachia. I now live in Atlanta, Georgia, and there are times where I'll tell my friends stories from what happened to me when I lived out there, and they're like, "What?" I already posted about my UFO story last year, and that video got to like 3 million views. But today, I'm going to tell you guys the story of when I was a kid and I encountered a skinwalker, or at least what I thought was a skinwalker. I hate long intros, so I'm just going to get into the story. The place I lived was a place called Jasper, Georgia. It's right next to LJ, and I lived in the place where the show Squidbillies was based on, and we have a Squidbillies shrine in our town center. I had a friend that I would stay with pretty often, and her family owned a 300-acre farm. And when I say family, it's just her and her mom who live there. And so they have like all these farm animals, and they have different parts of their land that you have to walk through trails in the woods to get through. Like, in order to get to one barn, you have to walk through the woods for like 10 minutes just to get there. So there was one day that I was sleeping over there, and we had been home alone all day. I was probably in 3rd grade when this happened. Some of you might ask why me and my friend were just like 2 3rd graders alone on this farm. And it was because my parents were getting a divorce, and so I needed a place to go, so I pretty much lived with this girl at the time. But back to the story. So my friend's mom was on the way home, but I guess there was like a lot of traffic, or she was running late or something. So she called my friend and she asked her if we could like go down to one of the barns and feed the horses before we went to bed. So at this point in time, it was probably like 8 o'clock. The sun was going down. It was about to be nighttime. You could still see the sun and the light when you're in the open field, but in the woods, it was like pretty dark. Like there was no sunlight. So my friend and I started walking through the pasture to the woods, and she had a flashlight with her. We got to the woods, she turned the flashlight on, and we started walking. We were walking for maybe like 3 or 4 minutes through these woods, so we're about halfway through the trail, and we're just talking about some shit and laughing. And then all of a sudden, my friend just stops talking, and like I was kind of just like looking at her, like as we were speaking. I wasn't really looking in front of me. And then she just like drops the flashlight and starts sprinting in the opposite direction, like back to the house. And so I was like, "You okay, Rebecca?" And because that was her name. And I turn and I see her sprinting, and the flashlight was just like on the floor in front of me, and I was like, what the fuck? So I turn back in front of me, and I just see like maybe like 10 feet away this gigantic like white figure. And I didn't look at it for long, but just like the sheer height of this thing, whatever the fuck it was, scared me so badly that I looked at it and immediately was like fight or flight mode. Like, I felt danger. So right when I looked at it, I turned the other way and fucking booked it. I was running faster than I'd ever ran before. So fast that I passed my friend, and I was like running and pissing my pants at the same time. Like, that's how fucking scary it was. And so I ran all the way back to her house, and in my brain I was like, what is the one place I can hide right now where no one will find me? And the only thing I could think of was like, I just ran to the laundry room and I got in the dryer. And so I was just sitting in the dryer, and it was like one of those old school dryers. It wasn't like plastic clear cover, so it was just like a white door that closes it from the front. And so I was just in there, I was like curled up in a ball, and I waited like, I don't know, what seemed like 15-20 minutes. I was just in there covered in piss, and eventually I thought that whatever the fuck was in the woods had like killed my friend. And so I was just crying, and like I was freaking out, but I was also terrified and didn't want to die, so I was just sitting in there. And then eventually my friend walks through the door, and I can tell that she's crying, and she's like hyperventilating. She's like like I hear that. And so I open the dryer, and she's like scared when I open it, obviously. And I was just like also crying, and we hug each other, and I was like, where did you go? And so she told me that she had ran and she got into like this trailer that was kind of near the house, because it was the only place she could think of to hide. And so we were both hiding, and I guess she just like mustered up the courage to run to the main house. And so we were both just like trying to explain what we saw and like put together whatever the fuck that was. And this was like 2008, maybe 2009. So I think I was like 12 or something when this happened, but this was way before like creepypasta or like any of these stories were like even around. So we couldn't even put a name to like what the fuck we saw out there. And so when her mom finally got home, we tried to explain what just happened, and she just like dismissed us, and she was like, you girls are just like overreacting. You guys saw a bear or like a deer or something, which is still terrifying if we saw a bear, but it definitely was not a bear, because this thing was like pure white. And in the dark, it's like the only thing you can really see is like, if there's someone standing in front of you with a white t-shirt, like you're gonna see that. But this thing was completely white, and that's all I remember is just like this gigantic, like 7 or 8 foot tall thing just like standing right in front of me, staring at me. And so I'm not friends with this girl anymore. I haven't talked to her in probably like 15 years. But I just remember that story, and I remember being so scared that I pissed myself. And the only thing I could think of that being is like a skinwalker. So maybe that is a skinwalker. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I've never told that on here, so I hope you guys were entertained and enjoyed it, and maybe got scared. But anyways, later this week I'm going to post another story about the Appalachian feral people, because I think I also had an experience with that when I was younger. There was a lot of weird shit that happened. But yeah, thank you guys. I'm gonna tell another weird story of something that happened when I lived in Appalachia. Don't give me shit about how I pronounce the fucking name. The Appalachian Mountains run through a billion states with different dialects, so shut the fuck up. I feel like it's just as justifiable to call it the Appalachian Mountains as Appalachian. It doesn't matter what you say, potato, potato. But anyways, back to the story. I lived in Jasper, Georgia, Inside of Jasper, Georgia, there's a small little town called Tate, Georgia, where they produce marble. There's like all these marble factories all around where I lived, and around the marble factories, it's like coated in this white dust. It was kind of weird. I'm gonna tell a story about Tate, Georgia today. So I had a friend who, their whole family lived on a mountain in Tate, Georgia. Like, it would be like my friend's house, their family next door, more family members next door, more family members across the street. Like, they ran the fucking block type shit. She was my best friend growing up, and she's still one of my really good friends to this day. She's awesome. But for the sake of this story, I'm gonna call her Rachel. So across the street from Rachel's family's house, there's this one house that has like all this kudzu in the backyard. And her mom always told us, don't go play in the kudzu, don't go over there. Because the person who lived at that house before unalived themselves, and it was just bad vibes over there. So one day, we went over there and we were just like fucking around in the backyard. Just like walking through the kudzu and like looking through the windows of the house and stuff. And we just kind of felt this bad energy. So we ended up just going back to Rachel's mom's house. So I don't know. I always knew like that place was kind of bad vibes. But anyways, fast forward, I'm in college. This is probably like 5 or 6 years later. Basically, Rachel and I are living together while I'm going to college in this town called Kennesaw, Georgia. I went to KSU. And Rachel's mom calls us and tells us this really scary story. She said that she had a dream that she walked to one of the family members' houses down the street. And sorry, I just saw my neighbor in the back and it kind of scared me. But she said she had a dream that she walked to one of her neighbor's houses, her family member, and she said in the dream there was this dude in a tall tuxedo, like a tall dude in a tuxedo with no face following her. And she said it freaked her out so bad that she started running in the dream, and then all of a sudden the dude with no face was in front of her, and she said he was just really close to her, and it scared her so bad that she woke up. So she called us and basically told us about this weird dream she had, and she said it was the most vivid dream ever, and it was just all sorts of weird. And so, yeah, I don't know. And she would call us pretty often, so that's not, like, unusual. We were like, damn, sorry about your dream, that sucks. I hope you don't have a bad dream tomorrow. And so then, the next day, she called us again, freaking the fuck out. So basically, when she called us, she said, so her and her boyfriend were having like a cookout at their house, and her boyfriend has 2 young boy children. And while they were cooking, the 2 boys wandered off to go play, and they went back in the kudzu patch behind that weird house. And all of a sudden, they were gone for like 15 minutes or so, and then they hear these 2 boys screaming and sprinting back to Rachel's mom's house. And basically, the 2 boys say that they were playing in the kudzu, and they turned around because they heard something, and they saw a tall dude in a tuxedo with, like, no face. And so, yeah. Rachel's mom was freaking the fuck out and was, like, crying on the phone with us, and it was really fucking scary. I don't know what the fuck to make of this story. It's just something that, like, I don't know. It happened, she told us about it, and then I was like, Slender Man? What the fuck? So, yeah. A lot of weird stuff happened growing up in Jasper, specifically around the area I lived in for some reason. I don't know if, like, I don't know what the fuck is in the water in this area, but yeah, a lot of weird stuff happened. That was one of the scarier stories, just because, I don't know, there's no explanation for that, and it's weird that Rachel's mom saw that person or that thing in her dream the night before. So, if you made it till the end of the story, shout out to you. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will post more stories. Bye, y'all.
I really had to just accept the fact that I live on the Appalachian Trail, and that's why weird shit happens outside my house all the time. I posted a video not that long ago of me and my husband hearing a voice right outside of our window, and that voice saying, "It's me." And it was like a childlike voice. Nothing on the cameras, nobody outside. And it happened to me again. It's the middle of the night. I'm upstairs, I'm in bed, my windows are open because it's a nice night. I hear children's voices in my backyard, loud and clear. Giggling, laughing, can't see anything on the cameras. I tell my husband, he can't see anything on the cameras. Now, I'd like to interject the fact that I'm not one of those white people that are gonna go and find out what's going on. I'm safe in my house, and I don't give two shits on what's happening outside of it. I just find it very weird that we're hearing these random voices in our backyard, and this is not the first time. And again, little kids are not gonna be outside in the backyard in the middle of the night.
Okay, creepy story time. This is a story about a guy named Danny who decides to rent a cabin in the Appalachian Mountains. And if you know anything about the Appalachian Mountains, you know where this is going. So Danny finds a cabin online. It's cheap, but it's described as remote and super peaceful, and that's exactly what he wanted. So obviously he makes his trip to the mountains, and if you've been to the mountains, you know that the roads they can be really scary. They're super narrow. You're going up, 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 like for miles and miles. You can't see around a lot of the turns because, you know, the trees and just the edge of the mountain and it being so winding. It was a creepy ride, he said, but when he got there, the cabin was what was described. It was a nice little cabin right on the edge of the ridge. And it looked kind of weathered, but still it was like nice and cozy. It had like a single bedroom, a wood burning stove, and the porch looked right over the valley. So it was everything he wanted, and he was happy with it. Now the first night was super peaceful. He said he even slept with the window open because the mountain breeze just felt really nice. You could hear the crickets and stuff in the woods. It was super peaceful. But the second night is where things started to get really weird. So first he heard slow but deliberate footsteps on the porch, which is like right outside the window, and that startled him. And then he hears tapping on the window, and that really startled him. So he grabs his phone and he checks the time, and it's exactly 3:12 a.m. So he's really creeped out, but obviously he's gonna go see what the tapping is, because don't they always? So there's like a little part in the curtain where he can like kind of peek through a little bit. So he peeks out there and he sees a tall, like abnormally thin figure. And so he opens the curtains completely. Why, I don't know. But he opens the curtains and he sees it's a woman, but like she looks not right. She's super thin, pale, barefoot. She's wearing like a nightgown, and she has long dark hair that covers part of her face, kind of like my creepy doll back there. And he asked her like, "Do you need help?" He said she didn't say anything. She just stood there and like her head was like tilted slightly. Oh, he also did say that her eyes were super dark and empty, so that's creepy. But then he was like, "Are you lost?" Like he's trying to get her to answer and she's not saying anything. And then all of a sudden she just kind of like smiles just a little bit. And she's like, "Let me in." This really freaked him out, and then her smile got way wider, like abnormally wide, and he went to grab a flashlight. So he rushes to grab a flashlight, and when he turns to shine it towards her, she's gone. So the next morning he just gets up and he hikes down the mountain like a mile, and there's like this little mountain general store, and the clerk in there looks at him and he's like, "You look like shit." And he's like, "Yeah, I didn't sleep very well last night. There was a weird woman that showed up to my cabin." And she was like, she was super pale with dark hair, and, you know, he described her or whatever. And the clerk was like, "Where are you staying?" And he was like, "The cabin is called Black Hollow Cabin." 'Cause, you know, they name all their cabins and stuff. And he was like, "That's where you're staying?" And Danny was like, "Yeah, why?" And he was like, "Do you know who that is? Is someone like missing or something?" And the clerk was like, "People have been seeing that woman for about 50 years. And the people that see her tend to go missing." So Danny was like, "What am I supposed to do?" He said, "Do not talk to her and absolutely do not let her in." So that night, Danny is freaked out, and so he has all the lights on, and he's got all the windows and doors completely locked, and he just sits on the couch all night with his like hunting utensil in his lap. Sorry, I don't know what I can say on here. And 3:12 a.m. here come the footsteps on the porch, and then here come the taps. But this time, she says his name. He hears Danny. So Danny just ignores her like he's told, and she says, Danny, let me in. And he just keeps ignoring her literally all night long. And then he hears the footsteps leave the porch. So the next morning, he packs his stuff and he leaves, but he stops by that store, and all the clerk says to him is, she'll find someone else.
I have a story time. This story actually just happened on January 24th of this year. So yes, they're still very much active, and this is still very much going on. The person who submitted this, so it's not want me to use her real name, so we're gonna call her Lisa. Lisa lives in a small town east of Tennessee, so yes, the Appalachian Mountains. So one night, Lisa is hanging out at her friend's house. It's her friend Mike, his girlfriend, who we'll just call girlfriend, and Lisa. As they're hanging out, they starts to hear what sounds like a really heavy metal object being dragged across the driveway. Lisa remembers that she forgot to lock her car, so she quickly grabs her keys and hits the lock button. She then decides to look out the window to see if she can see anything, but there's no one there. She then sees as this truck approaches the house, and as it gets near the front of the house, it swerves completely out of the way as if trying to avoid hitting something. Lisa then decides that she's gotta go out in the balcony to see if she can get a better look. She's thinking that maybe a part of someone's car fell off. Maybe that's the reason why it was like a metal rubbing against the pavement. Mike's girlfriend follows right behind her and stands behind Lisa. The girlfriend goes, do you see anything? Lisa responds with, not yet. So then the girlfriend goes, well, let's just go back inside then. As Lisa's getting ready to go right back in the house, she hears the girlfriend yelling her name, but it sounded far away. Thinking that maybe the girlfriend already made it all the way back in the house, she goes to quickly turn around, but runs right into the girlfriend. Turns out the girlfriend never went in. She was actually standing right behind her. With a shocked look, the girlfriend goes, someone just said your name. Run. Both girls run back into the house. Lisa was paralyzed with fear. Like, she was terrified. She crawled across the living room floor just crying as she's trying to explain to her friend Mike what just happened. All three of them decide to run into one of the bedrooms and grab a bat for protection just in case there's someone out there trying to harm them. As they're in the bedroom, they start to hear what sounds like someone screaming for help right outside, but it was almost as if it was coming from a bunch of different directions. They couldn't figure out where the screaming was coming from. But whenever they would look outside the window, outside was completely silent. They could only hear when they were inside the house. Lisa decided to stay inside Mike's house until she can get a hold of one of her family members who could come with a large flashlight and a weapon to help her walk to her car. The female voice she heard sounded exactly like Mike's girlfriend's voice. The voice made her feel like she needed to go to it. It was almost like she was being lured outside of the house. It wasn't until she ran right into the girlfriend that she realized that she was in trouble.
I got an Appalachian story in my email, and that might be one of the craziest Appalachian stories I have ever heard. Tonight's submitter did tell me I could use her real name, and her real name is Stacy, and she will be tagged in the description. So Stacy goes on this hike. Nothing crazy. She had been on this hike before during the day, but she's on this hike and suddenly she loses track of time. Boom, it's pitch black outside, and she looks down at her phone, and her phone is only at 3% battery and there's no signal. So she figures that she'll just go straight until she ends up hitting a road. Big mistake, because she didn't end up hitting a road. She ended up going deeper into the woods. She said something felt off, like the trees weren't right. Like they had been growing in pain, were her exact words. She kept hearing these sounds, not animals, not wind, like something was whispering, and she heard this metal clicking sound. Then she starts hearing what sounds like wind chimes, but not regular wind chimes. It sounds like they're made out of bone and they're off tune. At this point, she's like, I don't understand where the sound is coming from, but I need to get out of here. So she continues to walk, but then she sees something through the trees. It's this pale light blue light. So she's like, oh great, a campsite, maybe somebody can help me. So she starts walking towards it and she starts to see people, or what she thinks are people. She starts to realize very quickly that these people don't look right. They're wearing old nightgowns, they're very dirty, and it looks like there's blood on them. And she gets even closer and she's like, oh my god, their faces are wrapped in gauze and their hands are all red. At this point she just stops and she observes for a second, because she's like, I have no idea what's going on here. She observes and she realizes that they are operating on something, literally operating on something. There's someone laying on a table made of wood and bone, and she's just staring at this point when suddenly one of those people looks up at her. They look directly at her and she swears she couldn't see eyes, but she knew that they were staring at her. And then she heard a whisper. At first she doesn't know what it's saying, but then she realizes what it said, and it said, "You're early, we can begin." So she just books it. She didn't care where, she just started running. This absolutely terrified her. And as she's running, this dog appears out of nowhere. It was just standing there in the middle of the path, black as night, glowing eyes, making no sound whatsoever. So she thinks this dog is gonna attack her, so she gets scared again and she starts backing away very slowly, and then she turns around and blinks and she's in a different part of the woods. It's like she teleported. But that dog, it was still behind her, but she didn't hear it move. No panting, no pause, no breath. She started running again because she's like, I have to get out of these freaking woods. She's absolutely terrified at this point, but every time she runs, she stops. She doesn't see anything, and then she hears those wind chimes again, and then she turns and she looks and she sees the dog again. She's not giving up at this point, so she starts running again and she stops again, except for this time she doesn't hear wind chimes. She hears something like, it sounds like someone is blowing through some type of horn, or like she describes it as like she thought someone is blowing through a bone. Like that's what she was picturing in her head, like a loud horn that sounded like a bone. She says she's not really sure how to describe it or how she knew this. It's something that she pictured in her head, but like she heard it. It was loud and it was clear. So she's just standing there at this point in complete disbelief, and she's terrified out of her mind because she doesn't know how she's gonna get out of these woods. And as she's thinking all of these thoughts and hearing this sound through this like horn, she hears a whisper, and it says, "You're almost there. Let us open you up." This scared her out of her ever-loving mind. So at this point, she starts praying, and she's actually praying out loud, and she's saying, God, the universe, someone, can you please help me? Like, I don't understand what's going on. I need to get out of here. Suddenly, she's alone again, and it's just her in the dark, but it's very, very dark. Finally, she breaks through the trees, and she sees a road, but it's not a road that she recognizes. It's stretched forever in both directions. No signs, just blacktop and trees. So at this point, she's trying to think rationally, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna walk until I see a car, or a car passes me. And suddenly a car does pass her, but it doesn't stop, even though she's waving her arms. She screamed too, but they didn't even glance or slow down. Then she hears footsteps behind her again, and then she turns around, but there's nothing there. So she turns back around and she sees this woman, but she's wearing a wedding dress. This woman is just standing on the side of the road, not moving, and she looks very pale, and she said that her eyes looked very sad. She does think it's a little weird that she's wearing a wedding dress and she's on the side of the road, but she's like, it's a person. Hopefully this person can help me and tell me where to go. So she asks her for directions, and she's like, hey, am I going in the right way? I'm trying to get out of these woods and to this certain spot. And the lady goes, yes, you're going the right way. And so she thanks her, and the lady smiles at her. So Stacy turns around, and then Stacy turns back around really quickly to ask her another question, but the woman is gone. I mean, she said that there was no trace of this woman. There wasn't even footprints in the dirt where she was standing. But she turns around and she starts walking in the direction that the woman told her, and eventually she sees lights in the distance of a town. So at this point she's like, thank God, familiar streets, street lamps, houses. And eventually she does get home, but she still doesn't know what happened out there. And different people have told her that people have gone missing out in those woods. Some were found wandering roads miles away, talking about a woman in white. She also found out that other people had exclaimed that they had seen this black dog in the woods and that they had heard wind chimes in the trees. Everyone that she talked to said that if this ever happens to you again, if you see something, no you didn't. If you hear something, no you didn't. Which Stacy says this is nearly impossible for her to do. She was only gone for 2 hours, but it felt like an eternity. Only 2. But she also thinks that whatever was out there knew she was coming. Stacy says that she's never told anybody the story in fear of people not believing her, but that she trusts my community and that she knows that we will believe her. And I do believe her. And the crazy thing is that you don't believe something this crazy until it happens to you. I was talking to Jack. Do you guys remember Jack, the story that I told about the guitar and he apparently sold his soul to the devil? He was telling me that he didn't believe in the paranormal at all until what happened to him happened, and that now he can't even watch some of my stories because they scare him so much, because he now fully believes in the paranormal. And this is one of those stories where if you believe in the paranormal, it's hard to listen to because it's terrifying. One thing that I want to know about this story is what the hell those people were doing out there operating on somebody. It looked like some body to her, like a human being. So what the heck do you think that was? Because that part really got me and terrified me. The whispers scared me too, but like that part was the scariest part to me. I don't know about you guys, but please weigh in on this because I would love to know what you think that is, and anything you have to say about the story, please be respectful, but drop it in the comments because
read a skinwalker story and I have been waiting all day to make this video. And if you're wondering why I'm looking a little rough, it's because I just worked 10 hours. You can still see the indentation of my glasses. So please forgive me for looking like this right now. My husband and I occasionally take our Jeep into the sand-washed Mesa trails. We decided to pack some water and make a day of it. Towards the end of the trip, we heard a weird, open mouth whistle like someone just learning to whistle. I made a joke, not joke, that what if it was a skinwalker? My husband replied with, "That's okay, our Jeep can outrun it." That was the end of the conversation. We then noticed we were heading a little off track. Our navigation was pretty inaccurate and we realized we were fairly close to the Navajo land. We went home and my husband started researching GPS apps. A little while later, he found one and said we should go out for a small rip to test it out. Boy, was that a mistake. It was around 8:15 p.m. The sun was just setting and we had been out for about an hour and a half by this point. We were on a trail heading back home when my husband braked abruptly and asked, "What was that?" I asked what he was talking about and he said, "Out there by the dip, something ran across the trail and then back again." I laughed and asked if he was screwing with me, but he continued, "I swear I'm not. It was on 2 legs, but it was fucking fast. Unbelievably fast." I hadn't seen a thing and we proceeded as normal. I rolled up my window thinking it may be an animal and we got closer. We were going about 25 miles per hour so that he didn't hit anything if something jumped out. He said, "Right there, this is where I saw it." It was another trail that crossed ours, and as we crossed, we saw 2 young girls with dark hair, one a bit taller than the other, standing there watching us to the right. We chuckled as we passed and my husband said, "See, I wasn't fucking with you." We both fell silent for a split second. It didn't really sit well with us. There were 2 young girls and for all intents and purposes, it was dark. The sun had just set. Why were they out there alone? My husband looked through the driver's side mirror after we passed and yelled, "Oh my god, they're gaining on us. They're fucking gaining on us." I couldn't understand what I had just heard or why he would have said that. I looked through the passenger side mirror and I saw nothing. I looked at him with a what the fuck look on my face and then I saw how serious he was and how he just kept repeating, "They're gaining on us." I twisted my body to look through the back window and I distinctly saw the 2 black figures, one a bit taller than the other, less than 50 feet away and closing. Now, when we passed the cross trail, they were about 30 feet back, so for them to get from there to literally right behind us in the matter of seconds is impossible. My husband accelerated 30, 35, still gaining, 40, 45, still gaining. At this point, my husband just stomped on it and our Jeep was kicking up such an insane amount of sand that we lost visual. We were afraid to go home, afraid that they would follow us. We drove around for about an hour in almost silence, trying to process what we had just seen. Why were 2 young girls out there alone? How did they get behind us so quickly? How were they gaining on us? And most importantly, what the hell just happened? We drove home still shaken and started getting ready for bed. Now, our bedtime ritual for falling asleep is putting something on the TV and just dozing off. To the right of our bed, we had a sliding glass patio door. It's what I face when I fall asleep. I remember dozing off, then I heard a sound and my eyes shot open. I was seeing 2 shadows crossing the door. I didn't mention anything at the time because I was honestly unsure. If 1, my mind was playing with me, or 2, I was asleep. Not to mention the fact that if I had been asleep, I'd feel silly. So I only brought it up to my husband when I called him on my lunch break. He knew exactly what I was talking about with the shadows because he had seen them too. This happened almost 3 weeks ago. Since then, we've woken up once to our front door unlocked, one specific kitchen cupboard open almost every other morning, sounds, footsteps, etc. Just the image of like the shadows gaining on them while they're in a car. Terrified. What do you guys think?
It's feeling spooky outside, so I figured I'd share a really crazy story that happened to me when I went camping alone in the Appalachian mountains. It was about a year ago. It's July. I've had a notoriously bad birthday, so I wanted to really do something for myself. I told everyone I was going with people, even people at the campground. I said that I was with people just so they would leave me alone. I did my thing. I checked in with everyone when I got to the campground. I came with a knife and a sword. So I set up camp. I go up to an overlook to call everyone and I return to camp. Nothing really happens. It was a little odd when I got there. There were no crickets, no nothing, no sounds. I didn't really think it was that odd because the campground for Peaks of Otter is on sort of a mountainside and it was very rocky, so I was like, okay, there's probably not that many critters over here, which is fine. Arguably not fine. No food, absolutely no food with me in the tent, no, not even traces of food. I go to bed and everything's fine until about 2 o'clock in the morning. I wake up and I hear pacing around the tent and I was like, okay, this is weird, it's probably just a bear. So when things start swatting at me, I swat back. It's just circling and circling. It's a bear, probably. So eventually it stops and I go back to bed. Wake up maybe 2 or 3 more times to whatever it was circling and swatting. And eventually I just kind of let it do its thing and I would just listen. That was horrifying alone. I kept going. I tried to go through the night. And at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I wake up to this really weird dream where something was like reaching through the tent. I just felt like it was like hands, like human hands reaching through the tent, and I just kept saying, no, you're not welcome here, absolutely not. Then I wake up, but it was that wake up where you're in between sleep still and you're not really mentally present, but you're present enough to know that you're awake. I don't know if it was sheer exhaustion from just waking up constantly on the hour. I felt something reach through the tent and press on my chest like this way and then lift. I just remember thinking, like, I really hope that's a bear. It left. It ended up circling again, it swatted again, and it inevitably left. It was easily one of the craziest things that's happened to me, but I ended up just completely leaving. I would be very interested to hear any other stories that people might have from around that area, especially the Peaks of Otter. I know some of my friends at school had a lot of stories about walkers in Roanoke anyway, the Roanoke Star specifically. So I'd be very curious to see if anyone else has any stories. But yeah, a little break from music today, a little story time. So